Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and start lesson 75. It is entitled Implied Ratios. And if you're following along in your textbook with me, this is going to be on page 237 and 238. It is about a half a page on each side of the page, so it's a rather short lesson. So it won't take very long to go through it, but we're still going to touch on it to make sure that we can understand what it's talking about here. But if we remember, ratios were pretty much a comparison just of two numbers. And that comparison typically is written in a fraction form. So in this example, we have 3 over 4, or 3/4, which would give us our ratio. And if they are typically written as proportions, and proportions pretty much, as we learned before, are just statements that two ratios are equal. A proportion is just two ratios that have equal proportions, really. But the top number here, we could put multiple numbers, but if we put 9 up top, if we did the math, we would know that we would have 12 on the bottom. Because with ratio proportions, we know that 4 times 9 is going to equal 3 times 12. Therefore, this equation would be true because 3/4 does equal 9/12, or 9 over 12. Now, sometimes we run into ratio problems that are word problems. And most of the word problems that we're going to run into in this textbook, they don't use the word ratio. We typically have to recognize that it is a ratio problem, and we must also be able to pick out whatever that implied ratio is. Whatever ratio it's saying in that problem, we have to pick out those numbers. Now, we'll run through one example in our book. It's at the bottom of page 237, example 1, and I'll read it. It says, it takes 2½ eggs to make 140 cookies. Jenny wants to make 1,680 cookies. How many eggs does she need? So we see that this is a proportion ratio word problem, but it never says the words proportion or ratio in this example. We just have to understand that that is what it's looking for by reading this problem. So we would still write our example out. We have our ratio proportion diagram here. So we see that if it takes 2½ eggs, so we'll write 2½. And remember, sometimes if you need to, you can write the letters on the side just to keep your head straight so you don't accidentally put something on the wrong side. So eggs and C for cookies. So E for eggs, C for cookies. It takes 2½ eggs to make 140 cookies. Jenny wants to make 1,680 cookies. How many eggs does she need? So we see that by reading this out and putting it into a proportion ratio problem, we have a standard proportion problem like we've seen in previous lessons, and we know that if we have this, we're able to solve it. So we'll go ahead and flip over to page 238, which shows us actually solving the problem out. The first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to turn 2 1/2 into an improper fraction. So 2 1/2 would be 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 plus 1 is 5. So this would be 5/2. We'll go ahead and fill that in. So once we have 5/2 here, now we would run our problem just as we typically do. We're going to go 5/2 times 1,680 equals 140 times, remember anything beside a parentheses is times, the total number of eggs. We're just going to go ahead and replace this question mark here with an E so that we can throw a variable in down here so that we know that we can solve it. We're going to put E instead of X or Y or Z like we have done before, just so that we can keep in mind that we're looking for the number of eggs. So now we would run through our problems here. So we would times 5/2 times 1,680. We know that we would have to turn this into an improper fraction as well and do the multiplication. Just so that we'd save our time on here, we would run through our multiplication, which would give us 4,200 equals 140 times E. So now we always remember with these type problems, we're trying to get our variable by itself because we want it to say E equals our answer. So in order to get E by itself, we have to get rid of this 140 here. So since it's 140 times E, to get rid of it, we do the opposite sign. The opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide it by 140. But we remember if we divide anything on this side by 140, we have to divide on the other side of the equal sign by 140. So 140 over 140 would equal 1. 1 times E is just E. So E equals, we do our division here, 4,200 divided by 140 is 30. So we end up with E equals 30. So going back to the question that we had, remember with these type of problems, the key with these is that we always have to remember what is the problem asking. In this case, it's how many eggs does she need? Well, we found out here that she needs 30 eggs in order to make 1,680 cookies. So the answer here would be 30 or E equals 30. Either answer would be correct. Now we'll run through one more example here. We'll go ahead and clear our board off. I'll just give us a new sheet here. Right. Example 2, almost at the top of page 238, it says it takes 3 tons of fertilizer to fertilize 170 acres. Farmer Brown wants to fertilize 1,870 acres. How many tons of fertilizer does Farmer Brown need? So again, it never uses the word proportions and it never uses the word ratios, but we know that this would be a proportion ratio word problem. So we would fill in our boxes here. We know that it's talking about fertilizer, so we're going to put in F. And it's talking about acres, so we're going to put A, just to help keep our mind straight here. So it takes 3 tons of fertilizer, so we'll write out 3 tons, 3, to fertilize 170 acres. We'll write our other proportion fraction here. The problem then continues and says Farmer Brown wants to fertilize 1,870 acres. We put it on the bottom of the fraction because it's talking about the acres. And then the question asks, how many tons of fertilizer does Farmer Brown need? So we're just going to write F here because it's talking about fertilizer to help keep it simple. We're looking for how much fertilizer does he need here. So we're going to run our problem through just as we've seen before. We cross multiply 3 times 1,870 equals 170 times F, because we cross multiply both sides. 3 times 1,080 will equal 170 times F. So now we start and run through our problem. 3 times 1,870 would give us the result of 5,610 equals 170 times F. So again, the key with these is we need to get F by itself, so we have to divide 170 because it's the opposite of multiplication. If we do it to one side of the equal sign, we have to do it to the other side of the equal sign. So 5,610 divided by 170, 170 over 170 would equal 1, and 1 times F is just F. So F equals, and then 5,610 divided by 170 would be 33. So we would end up with an answer of F equals, 33, which is what would go into our box up here. So our question is asking us, how many tons of fertilizer does Farmer Brown need? Well, he needs 33 tons of fertilizer. 33, or F equals 33, would be our answer.